Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Get in the Garage.
We're a music podcast.
For music lovers.
We've got a great show planned for you today, but before we begin, as always, please remember to like and comment and subscribe and share the podcast with all of your friends and family. Hit that little notification bell on the bottom, and don't forget to review us and rate us on Apple Podcasts. And I don't know if Spotify has that, but if it does, do that too. Today, we have a very special guest. He is one half of the band Pocket Vinyl from here, the great state of Connecticut. Him and his partner, Elizabeth Jancewicz, make up the band Pocket Vinyl. Please welcome to Get in the Garage, Mr. Eric Stevenson. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you coming on today, man.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to this.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
Far too often, these kind of things are a little short form stuff, and I'm excited to have just a long conversation about music and art.
Absolutely.
And we are excited to talk with Pocket Vinyl, who are going on a tour this summer. Dates are right now. You will see them on the bottom of the screen. You should go to one. You are also releasing a comic book about your 50-state tour. I kind of maybe wanted to start there because it kind of deals with touring, which you are going on, and your new project. Before we even get further into it, Pocket Vinyl have a new album out. Michael, can you grab that for me?
I will indeed.
This album, You Never Say Goodbye. When you leave, it's available now. You should purchase it. It is wonderful. It is right here. Wow. Thank you very much.
It's streaming everywhere. You can, if you'd like a vinyl, you can get it through Bandcamp or at a show.
Yes, and links will be down below. So back to this comic book. You toured all 50 states and set a world record, and you have a comic book about it. Can you tell us a little bit about the comic book and Elizabeth and how she does the comic book that kind of, I would say, matches the life of your band?
Yeah. Well, so for some quick context, so the band is mostly myself and Elizabeth. I play piano and sing, and Elizabeth paints on stage, and she makes a 2x2 foot painting that are kind of similar to some of our album artwork and things. And we auction those off after the show. We've been doing this full-time since 2011, and we played our 1,000th show in November. I don't know. We've just kind of kept going with a small yet loyal and passionate fan base spread very thinly across the United States because of all the touring. We often joke that we can almost go anywhere in any town, and like at least 1 to 5 people will show up and be super excited. Yeah. We don't have big draws in a lot of places, but we have little draws everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in 2019, we did a tour where we thought it would be a great idea to try to break the world record by playing a show in every state in the fastest amount of time. Everyone we knew told us accurately that it was a bad idea, and we said, no, we disagree. So we booked it, we did it, spoiler alert, we did it. It's not official anywhere, so if you look at like Guinness or anything, it's not there because, well, the book gets into it. But we didn't officially go by the rules. But in terms of playing a show in every state in the fastest amount of time, we did it. The previous record was 50 days, and we did it in 44 days. 44 days, 13 hours, and 50 minutes.
Wow. What states did you hit? Like 2 states in one day?
Oh, the first day was 3. We hit Connecticut at 1, Rhode Island at 6, and Massachusetts at 11. Wow. And then that was the only 3-day show. And then there were like a few others. Trying to think. We did like Kansas and Missouri was right one there, day. Yeah. North and South Carolina was a day. Indiana and Illinois were a day. There might have been one other one, but yeah, it. Anyway, it was a tour that we completely destroyed our mental health in the process. I mean, just demolished it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I remember actually, we listened to a lot of podcasts and stuff on the road, and there was we were listening to this one called Heavyweight, which is the entire podcast is this guy meets people who need to get over like a childhood trauma and like helps them do that and like and then they record it anyway. And this one person went to ask forgiveness from this other person, and we were just like listening, and I was kind of thinking of something else, and then the person in the podcast was like, "Hey, I'm sorry," and the person who they were saying sorry to said, I forgive you. And just like that, I went to like cry. And I remember we were like driving through Utah. It was like probably like 9 shows left or something. And I was just like, and then I got to stop and I'm like, what is wrong? Like, it was just so, everything was just right at the surface for like, yeah, it was rough. I had a panic attack on stage, like after the effects of which I'm still feeling to this day.
So this was a van tour, I assume?
Oh no, my friend, this was a Camry tour.
Oh, well,
This was in our question too. Pocket
Yeah.
Vinyl has so many projects that you should check out. They have a documentary
Maybe too much.
where they went on tour. What's the name of this documentary?
Drive, Play, Sleep.
Drive, Play,
If
Sleep.
you're watching this on YouTube, you're really close to it.
You're really close to it.
It
And
used to
they're-
live
we'll
on
link it in the
Amazon
description
Prime,
box
but-
below as well, so that
Yeah,
way
yeah.
you can go ahead and click on it.
Yeah, it bounced around a few other streaming sites, but now it just lives on YouTube, and we're
Yeah.
happy that it's there.
I loved this movie so much. And speaking of the car that you toured in, it shows all of the car trouble that a musician and band will go through. And you are on a new car. So what car were you on for this last tour? What car are you using now? This is a question.
So
that
we're
we
now
have.
in Pocket Vinyl, like the Mach 4 of cars we've had in the last about 13 years. We now have a Subaru Outback, but for the 50 States tour, we had a blue 2003 Camry. I mean, not to brag, but it was an LXE.
Is that the one with the wood grain in it?
Yeah. Well, it was plastic, but it looked like wood grain.
It's good enough.
Oh, it felt like
It's
driving
good
a log
enough.
cabin,
Maybe
my
it was a
friend. It was
veneer. I
great.
think it was like a wood veneer, maybe.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I have to also comment on that documentary because
I didn't even know you guys watched it. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
and
Did you watch it?
I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, come
He
on,
said
man.
it like you did. It was so great,
No, it's
man.
fine.
It was like my wife and I, we were, I think it was Monday maybe. I was like, hey, Eric's coming on the podcast. Like, we want to watch this? She's like, oh yeah, let's watch it. And we watched it, and man, it was like, it was so great. It was such a great thing to watch, and there was absolutely bleak moments, and then there was like great sort of comic relief moments. Every time you'd hear the car skid and a crash and then car troubles would come on,
Yeah.
it was like that comic break that you needed because like things would get heavy for a second,
Yeah.
But watching that, it's a real good insight into this is what it really is, because I think that a lot of people, I think it's easy to look at the idea of touring through sort of rose-colored lenses. And
Oh,
it has this
100%.
sort of romantic quality about like, we're going to go on the road and we're going to do this and that. But I think what people don't realize is that we're hanging up sheets over the windows in the car so that way some stranger doesn't come up to our car when we're sleeping in a Walmart parking lot, and like that's not romantic at all. That's like scary.
I had
and
a
sketchy.
friend who watched it, and he's like, he didn't know that we played some shows for free. He's like, I thought you always got paid. And I'm like, no.
For love of the game, man.
I mean, you hope to sell some merch, and we have the benefit of the painting that Elizabeth does. We auction it off, and
Right.
that usually gets, we've been able to make it our full-time careers for the most part.
Right.
But yeah, it's funny that the usual reaction to the film that we get is like people going, that was pretty good. Like, and I get it. We filmed it on. It wasn't even like an iPhone or anything. It was like a tiny little, like a $70 like camcorder thing that I had bought even like 5 years earlier than that, and we filmed as much as we could in 2016. And then we released the movie in 2017, and it was kind of just like hit play, film as much as we can, and we'll find the movie later. But I mean, it looks like it's basically a home video camera film, but it's funny that and I mean, I think this is something that I think a lot of how do I put this at this level of being a musician, of kind of like small and stuff. It's I think just people underestimate. It's easy to assume that someone who is not super famous must not be doing good work. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think we all here know that that's not the case, because some of my favorite bands we've played with, and they've only released like one album, then broke up, and they're just like a group of 4 guys who made an amazing album that no one's ever heard of, and to think of the band also making a movie. The track record with that isn't great. But both Elizabeth and I, we kind of figured we knew our way around narrative and story, and we would kind of know how to craft it through the footage. And but it's just, again, I just always find it funny when people are like, yeah, it was like that was good. Like I enjoyed I wasn't like looking at my watch the whole time, which again, I've seen some other like videos that bands have tried to like put together because they think them just like talking to the camera is interesting for an hour and a half, and it's not. And
I've seen so many music documentaries, and I'm not like, this is like testimony to the camera, and that it's top 10 has to be.
Thank you, man.
It told the story of what you guys were telling in a way that like nobody tells the story, because like you said, it's under what you guys are doing is underground for most people, and to bring like, what does it take to do this? That's what it took to do it, and you really showed it. And like some movies try to do it in a certain light, but it doesn't really get it. And like,
well, that's because we didn't have a film crew. I mean, it was just us hit and play around each other, and I think that helps. Like, I don't know, just like get in there. And two, it's most other music documentaries have often been like, they're often about a famous band,
right.
And like maybe the first like 15 minutes will be like when they were like struggling, and then it'll be like, and then they got the attention of this person, and I'm always like, how did that happen? Tell me, because it doesn't just, I don't know. Anyway, and so we wanted to show like what it's like. We also, there were a lot of people who, when we talk about us touring, you could tell they, like, whether it's family members or friends or whatever, like if you haven't been in that world, they don't really get it. And Elizabeth and I were kind of like, what if we like made a thing? We'd just be like, all right, watch this. That's what it is. And I will say, thankfully, from what I've heard of other musicians who've seen it, and whether it's like metal, hip hop, other indie artists, folk, like whatever and old and young and stuff, they all kind of seem to agree that it kind of hits the points that, at least for right now, well, it's almost 5 years old now, but this current I think it's still relevant, but it kind of hits what it's like. And I know even some people who've showed it to family members and be like, this is what I do.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in a car, what like logistically do you have with you while you're touring? Do you have like a keyboard, microphone, canvases? Do you bring canvases? Do you buy them?
We don't use canvases. We use masonite board.
Okay.
We get you go to a Lowe's or Home Depot.
Yep.
You can get a 4x8 huge
and then just
board,
chop it up yourself.
And well, you can do it at Home Depot. They have a big chopping station. We get that into then 2x2, 2x2 things. Okay. Paint those white, and that's the thing. A lot cheaper than canvas. And that travels much better too. But keyboard. That I actually usually use microphones at the place.
Okay.
Merch, clothes. You Tetris it in, and you kind of figure out a way to do it.
Yeah. Before we leave the the documentary conversation, I just would like you to know that you, Jade, my wife, you gave her a bit of an anxiety attack because she's like, what do they do if they have to go to the dentist? Like the whole, like she's on like the edge of her seat the whole. She's like, well, what do they do? Like, what happens if somebody gets hurt? Like, what are they? She was like so like anxious the whole time, and it's just so funny that like man, because like she plays music as well, but I wouldn't like say that she's like a gigging style, or anything like that.
My parents and her have very similar worries.
Yeah, well, that's because
what's your 401k?
Full disclosure, like we have a we have a 4-year-old, and it's I think it's like parent, maybe it's just parent brain or something, But I two things I wanted to say. Firstly, in watching that documentary, I just want you to know that we really fell in love with you guys, like wholeheartedly, because we're like, oh my, and we're watching it, and she's like, he just loves her so much, and that just makes me so happy. And I'm like, I know, because it did, because like we love, and I'm like, they love each other. That's amazing, And then also, man, Nissan Altima, bad call. What are you doing? Those cars suck. They're terrible.
Oh yeah, when you bought the Nissan Altima in the movie,
like, no, not the Altima. Even the first scene, you were like, oh, I know where this is going.
When you traded in the Corolla, and you're like,
no, it was a Camry. The first one was a Camry. We went Camry. Camry, Altima, Camry, and now Subaru.
When you got the Altima, I was like, oh no. I was like, that's not going to go good.
Because I've had many friends who have had that model Altima, and the minute
2002.
I saw it come on screen, I'm like, oh, those engines are trash. Or not really.
Man,
it's the transmissions are bad. They have that CVT engine, that early
I'm not
CVT
a car person. I've never been a gear person. Even my piano, like I did enough research to know I have a Yamaha CP300. I know that. I don't know any stuff about gear. I know when you had Sline and those guys on, you talked about gear for a while.
Yeah.
That's not me. I'm not going to have that conversation. I just
Luke.
don't. Like when I was into snowboarding when I was a kid, people would be like, I got a snowboard. And they're like, whoa, what kind is it? I'm like, it's black.
It's a flat one.
It goes on the snow.
I'm just
Yeah.
not. And so
Yeah.
with cars, that hasn't been something that interests me.
Yeah.
And every one of our cars has pretty much been, we got the first Camry through my family, got the Ultima through a guy on Craigslist. It was just a bad move. Got the second Camry through a hint of luck going into something that just got traded in, wasn't even out for sale yet, like at a dealer, but was used, and it was a good price. And then recently our Subaru, I got, again, a good price through family. And so it's always like, yeah, the Ultima was the only one where I went out on my own, and yeah, it was terrible. But, I mean, yeah, again, with the price of the car and how much we put into it over 6 months in that movie, it was basically an $8,000 bit in the movie is what we paid for. But I think it was kind of worth, like, in the long run. I'm like,
Oh no, it was
because
good.
it
was
needed,
good.
yeah, it had those moments in the movie.
Yeah.
But that was the most expensive part of production. Was definitely that.
Yeah.
Besides that, I think we spent $200 on the movie.
Yeah. The car budget was outrageous.
Yeah, it was nuts. I don't know who was in charge of that, but they got fired for sure.
So, like, leading on to, like, what's going on now, you guys are touring. You did the 50 States tour. You're about to release a book about this.
On October 10th.
October 10th.
It's called How to Completely Lose Your Mind, a graphic novel memoir of one indie band's attempt to break a world record.
And
It's very wordy. Our publisher says that's good for...
I like it.
Yeah. From a sales point of view, it makes sense. There's keywords in there, it's people for like Googling, as well as like if you pick it up and like you read the title, you get a vague sense. But like, there's things like graphic novel memoir. The word novel is fiction. If it's a novel, it's fake. A graphic novel, fake. It's a graphic memoir. But they're like,
fake,
well,
real
no one
fake.
knows what a graphic memoir is. That sounds like it's like a porn star memoir or something like that. So it's like graphic novel memoir. So things like that don't make,
Yeah,
you
you
know
have
what
to
I
be
mean? But I
crafty
get
with
it.
it.
I get it marketing wise, but
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, I don't know, just,
well,
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of ask you. So, seeing this more of like Elizabeth's side of the band, her.
Oh, I will
project-
say it's pre-order right now too. You
Oh
can
yes, it's pre-order.
Just Google it. It's fine.
Please.
I'll give you a link.
That's more of like Elizabeth's project. So, how do you feel being like represented by her in a comic? Like, do you like look at the comic sometimes and be like, I don't remember it like that, or like or like, oh, you felt that way, or like things like that? Is how do you feel as like being represented? Because that's her being like, this is what's going on in our band, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the book is basically a long form version of her comic, which is called The Turing Test, which you can find like the TOURING. I think at The Turing Test everywhere. Yeah, and that's like a semi-autobiographical thing about her life, just to clue in. I know you all know. I'm letting them.
For them.
Yeah.
You guys.
This is how this all works. Trying to do that. All right. Anyway, so now you're in the know. So yeah, well, the funny thing is, so that the whole comic, sometimes Elizabeth will ask my perspective on things, and I'll help her like form a joke and stuff. But for the most part, that's all like 100% her and like her perspective. The book we did write together. We kind of like wrote down everything we could remember each day from that tour. And then we kind of realized the through line was the story was about how we lose our, it's like the plot is doing the world record, but the story is really about how we're losing our minds and the community that helped us get like limp to the end. That's pretty much a long form version of the Turing Test. And in the Turing Test, it's the only thing that's weird. I honestly like love it. I don't know, my ego, it's whatever. It's attention. I always love attention.
I love you in comic book form, by the way.
Oh,
it's
thanks.
very you. Like just her. Like I'm like, oh yeah.
Thank you. See, it's funny because I feel like in the comic, more often than not, my character's the straight person to her.
Yes.
Like she, you know what I mean? Like she's kind of like the silly one doing the joke. Whereas in like life, I was always like the class clown or something like that. And so it's funny that she almost casts me as a slightly different role. But then every once in a while, she does a really great job at like making the Eric character break that role in a good way. And Yeah, but no, I love it, and it's never like mean or something. She never like does anything that's embarrassing. And if there's something that she thinks is on the line, she'll ask me.
Yeah.
And I think there's been like a few times that, has there been? No, I don't think there has been a time where I've like told her, no, don't do this or that. So I think usually actually I'm pitching her of like, hey, what if the air
you
character
should.
did this embarrassing thing?
So like further into that question, I love the dynamic of the band where Elizabeth is painting, you're playing, and so I kind of wanted to like ask you, maybe it was a little inside baseball, but are you like,
No, let's go
you
there.
know, musicians kind of have like this conversation going that non-musicians don't really understand about, where you kind of talking with each other in your head, but you're not really saying words out loud like, oh yeah, that's cool, this is that.
Sure.
Are you talking, is Elizabeth ever painting something that you are kind of like having an inside conversation on, or like is it ever, or really what I'm trying to ask you is like, is she ever like make something that is like a inside joke to you, or like maybe painting something that reflects you a little bit while you're playing? I know it has to do that naturally anyway, but is there ever like a little bit more of that going on, or do you guys not talk about it?
No, we're sharing glances, you're reading each other, reading the room, like you're in constant communication with anyone you're on stage with. Probably in the same way that, you guys are all kind of in communication with each other right now in various ways of just doing the podcast and stuff.
Right.
And so there's that. More like, some people think like, oh, if like they ask like when Eric's playing like a G minor, do you go like, oh, I'm gonna use blue? Like, yeah. Like, yeah. It's not like that. She kind of says that she usually thinks up about 50% of an idea beforehand, and then on stage figures out the rest of it, the other 50%, like kind of improvise it. But then there's also been times where as soon as I play the first note, she completely changes her mind and just goes and does something else. So she is just good at following her intuition. And look, I don't know what I believe in terms of like why we're here and how everything is spiritually connected, but I will say it is suspicious how often Elizabeth will paint something and someone will come up after the show and be like, oh, that looks like my cat that just passed away last week, or that I had a dream of that whale last night, or I had that, like, something where people, and I know, you can look at statistics and confirmation bias, and she's, painting animals, and we all have, sure. But it's more fun to leave room open for like,
for sure.
I don't know what's going on. And again, the amount of times that people like come up almost in tears of like, how did you know to paint that? And that's me, or that like, I mean, even sometimes it's like she'll like paint like, I don't know, like a squirrel and a deer somehow interacting with each other. She usually does animals things, but sometimes she does monsters and other stuff too. But she'll do that, and then someone will come up and be like, that reminds me of my brother who died when he was 5 years old 20 years ago, and I feel like this is me and him and stuff. And Elizabeth's just like, great. Like that's not wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like that. Okay, but even she'll just be like, yeah, I don't know. That's just what I felt like I should have painted, or like she feels like the room is like, no, I need to do this. Yeah, I don't know. So it's a. But I mean, yeah, we're definitely, and we influence each other a lot in the long run. You know what I mean? Like in we're almost always around each other, and so there's that, but it doesn't happen. It's on a bigger scale than just like within a song or something.
No, I love like how you answered that question, because you kind of put it into my head the way I wasn't really thinking about it, because I'm thinking, it's the performance, it's happening right there. I love where you're just like, no, that painting might be for another reason that we don't really know about,
Well,
and that to me is like a whole. Something I didn't even think of, and I think that's like another beautiful element, because I'm like thinking, I'm like, okay, it's more of like this kind of conceptual thing, and you're just like, no, it's way more broad out, and now I'm like, oh, I get that, and it's more, that makes me think like, oh, it's more. I definitely love that statement.
One of the more beautiful things that Elizabeth ever said to me, which I feel this is with music too, is she often feels like, and if you don't get, I know everyone in this room will, but it sounds kind of like pretentious or whatever if you're not a creative person, but she often describes that she feels like her paintings are more like she's like wiping away fog from a window, revealing what was there the whole time, rather than like putting it on there. Which I mean, I have to feel like the best pocket vinyl songs, I feel like I found them more than I wrote them. The bad ones I wrote, but the really good ones, I feel like it's like you find a gold nugget in a cave. You know what I mean? And it's I don't know. But I remember that was kind of early in our relationship. I think she said that, and I remember just being like, oh, we're like on the same wavelength in terms of how we kind of approach things. But
yeah.
No, please.
I was gonna say it's that story. You ever hear the story of the music stand maker, where they ask him how he makes music stands, and he says, "Oh, I just go out into the forest and I find a piece of wood, and then I just chip the wood away until the music stand appears in front of me." It's like that. It's that same thing. It's that same. And I think your musically now, if we can talk a bit about music as well, I think that you're
king of the segue.
Sorry,
No, it's fine.
but I'm saying so. Like
you guys are professionals.
I watched that. Hey, baby, we're front. It's showbiz, baby. So I watched the interview with you with for the day, where you're talking about sort of like the music writing process and all that sort of stuff, and I think that your music has this thing where you were talking about one thing that I really did love, and it was the idea of saying the phrase "oh my God," and how that was sort of this thing that was like, it was you can't say that. It's for growing up, you can't say that. That was that thing, like, and I noticed that through listening to the music and stuff that there are a lot of more. There's bigger ideas at work within your lyrical content, and what, like, the statement that you're trying to make. You have a song called "Be Here Now," and we're like, I don't know if that's a tip of the hat to Ram Dass, but we're like Ram Dass heads.
No, I read "Be Here Now," and that song was sort of a direct of me trying to be present and failing at meditation, and that song is about failing in meditation.
Yeah. And I'm a chronic meditative failure myself, so I hear that.
Me too.
Yeah, and I noticed that too. A lot of like that kind of stuff. How is that how you kind of like wrestle with those things? Is like kind of writing them out and being like, is that how I feel? That's because it takes a lot of guts to like come out and be like, this is how I feel about this, or I'm unsure about this feeling, especially when you're talking about things like such as spirituality and things of that nature, trying to find yourself.
I don't know if it's like, I wouldn't describe it from my perspective as having guts or anything. From what I understand, ever since I was a little kid, it is not hard for me to express emotions and like to feel things. There's certainly things I've pressed down and through therapy and stuff I've understood stuff, but for the most part, like, I remember having a conversation in high school with a friend, and I was just like, I love you, and they're just like, I can't believe you can just say that so freely. I was like, what are you talking about? You just say I love you, and you express that to the person, and then they look back at you happy, and everyone wins. Like, why not express that all the time? And so, there's been times where people have been like, with like talking about like the spirituality stuff or I don't know, the meditation, like that. I'm interested in that stuff, and obviously I want to talk about it, but it doesn't feel like how do I put this? It's not that it doesn't feel like a risk. I don't know how to say it other than I think I think your admiration of my bravery is misplaced. Is all I mean to say, is that it's more of just it just makes sense to me to talk about it. Like, it doesn't necessarily feel it is vulnerable in a way, but like, I don't know. I mean, also we're talking like, I think the first time I brought up spirituality and like God and my experience with theology and stuff in a song was like, over a decade ago now. And so part of me is wondering how much of it I'm just immune to that. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel as like, I remember there's one song called Foggy Mess. It's an older one of ours that a lot of people responded to. And I remember when I wrote it, I did feel it's kind of a summary of where I've been with like theology up till that point. And when I wrote it, it was kind of, it felt, I was a little worried about people hearing it and judging me and stuff. But I found that sometimes the more specific you are about something and like esoteric, that it's the more you realize it's a real broad subject. And like that song itself, Foggy Mess, has probably gotten us more fans than almost any other single song. Like in terms of people coming up to us after a show, talking to us and stuff about and like bringing it up by name.
Well, I love that. I'm going to say personally, when I listen to it, I feel like a certain kind of like, oh, I would personally be like, oh, I don't know if like I want people to know how I feel about that. You know what I mean? Because and that's why I love that. And it's just and for you to be like, no, that's just who I am. Even more of an expression of like.
I don't say that as like a braggy. It's
no,
just,
it's different strokes, different folks kind of thing. Because it's like when I listen to it, I hear you, and I'm like, oh yeah, I relate a lot to those. You know, but then on the other front, I'm like, oh, I would be, you know.
Well, to speak to what Luke is saying, I think, like, personally, I identify more with what you're saying than with what Luke is saying. Because I'm a guy who, like, tells my friends I love them and will talk about, like, the Bhagavad Gita to a stranger. And, like,
whereas Luke over here doesn't tell anyone he loves them.
No.
Luke hangs out here in the basement. He spins his records.
That's what you're implying, right?
Yes,
no.
kind of.
But you know what I'm saying, though, because I get where you're coming from, though. Because, like, that, I think it's that thing where it's, like, at least speaking from my perspective, is that like it's the only conversation to have, man. Because we're talking. Because it's like this is what it's all about. Like we're all just trying to figure out what we're all doing on this rock in the middle of eternity anyway. So like, what else is there to talk about? You know what I mean? And having that conversation, I think through music can maybe allow people who don't really want to talk about that kind of stuff have the ability to tap into those ideas and go, oh wait, yeah, you know what? Like that's an interesting point, or I never thought of it that way, you know, like that kind of thing, you know.
And I will say that it's not, I don't mean to imply that I feel like we haven't been taking risks. I mean, like, so we've released a number of albums at this point, and our third album was called Death Anxiety. That's what Foggy Mess is on, but it was all about songs about death from like a trying to be a non-depressing point of view and more just like a curious and wondering and stuff. And then, you know, and that felt vulnerable for a little bit, and then it stopped being vulnerable because we just did it for so long. And then we made an album of all very soft songs because I thought, well, maybe it's vulnerable to play very quiet songs in like loud bars and try to see if we could get people to still pay attention to us, almost like daring them in a way. And then after that, we made an album, Uncomfortably Unsure, all about sex and sexuality, which is stuff that felt probably at like the time of release the most vulnerable thing, because growing up in like a religious household, I just had a lot of hang-ups about sex and sexuality, and I mean, even to this day, like, I know I'm like a thin, spindly little noodle arm guy, but like body dysmorphia and being worried about my weight or my face, my hair, like, which I kind of consider that all like looks and stuff to be in kind of the sexual realm. Sure. That it's all. I don't know. It's just like that felt vulnerable, and then I thought like, well, it's easy to write songs about conflict, and so what if we wrote a whole album of happy songs? That sounds like a challenge and kind of vulnerable to write non-cheesy happy songs, and that ended up being an album all about hope that we made called Winter Person that we released in the first year of the pandemic. And then this new album, we tried not to have a theme, but then when I kind of like we wrote all the songs and took a step back, we realized that they were all more or less like angry prayers from a person who doesn't know what the future holds, which is clearly influenced by the pandemic. But at the same time, it's weird because the new album is one that I've like people have listened to and come up to me at shows, and like talking to them about that, they seem to understand the album better than I do. And where all the other ones have been like, there's a theme and we go for it and stuff, I feel like I'm still like unpacking it in a way that, you know, like there's the meditation song Be Here Now and stuff, and there's some other stuff, but like it still feels, I don't know. Anyway, so I still feel like vulnerable, but again, to not talk about it, it seems obvious to talk about these things. Like I don't know.
Well, since we're talking about lyrical content and themes, do you have any specific influences that helped you like find your voice or write the songs that you write, or piano stylings, you know, chords and all that kind of stuff, like the kind of like realms you are in musically? Do you have any like touchstones of like, these are the artists that kind of like showed the light to get to myself, to express myself?
I will say just about every pocket vinyl song starts with me trying to rip off someone. I think every single song is just like me being like, that's a cool David Bowie song. And then I like try, and then by the time we get to the the final version. It's nothing like where it started, but I will say Radiohead, probably with a bullet, is my favorite band. Beck was very influential, and Beck was also someone who Radiohead too, but I think Beck more so, where like almost every album is like a different thing,
all over,
and that's kind of what now that if you count like we have a Patreon album, a B-sides album, we have a hidden album, we have a few other things that this is our 10th album, and it's how many people are interested in hearing the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And while we are a piano band, and there's kind of that element to it, although I would like to do an album with absolutely no piano on it someday. Who knows? I completely lost my train of thought there. Sorry.
Artist touchstone.
Yes, that's it. That's what we were talking about. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Like I said, it's mental health stuff. Really going from 2019. It's still echoing. Yeah, I don't know. Like Ray had that. People that often will compare me to either Ben Folds, Elton John, or Billy Joel. All I think because I play the piano, and there's no one else who's a male who's been like a huge piano person besides them. I think women in the last 15 years have been destroying the piano rock, like Fiona Apple, Regina Spektor, Amanda Palmer. There's countless others that have been amazing and stuff, and I love it every once in a while that I get compared to them, but because I'm a guy, I often people don't think to. But yeah, I don't know, like those, but it's also, I mean, just the other day I heard this Beatles song that I hadn't heard before, and I then later that night I sat down and just tried to rip it off and kind of made something that will probably be something in the future.
What song was it?
Real Love. That came out in '96.
Yeah,
Do you know about this?
Yeah,
I did. I just found out the other day.
The Lennon, they went on the anthology album.
Yeah.
It's Real Love, and the other one's Freeze a Burn. The Lennon demos that got
Yeah,
I
and
didn't know
in the
about
'90s, I didn't know this, but the other three Beatles got together and like recorded
fleshed
over
it
it.
out?
Yeah. And it was just a Beatles song that came out in the '90s that I was like, how did I not know about this? And it was beautiful.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I don't know, but then sometimes you just like, I don't know, you just see a good movie or something. And then
Is it
you
always
sit down
only
and-
piano? Do you use other sounds on the keyboard? Do you use electric pianos or organs?
There's
and
one
things like
song called Brittle Wolf that live I'll use this like kind of a Rhodes type sound, but for the most part I'm not a like a keyboardist or a synth guy.
Sure.
Like we've used a lot of synths in our music, but I don't think, I don't know, the piano just seems so, the sound of it is so rich. I think within the context of rock and stuff, it is very like one direction. Like I mean, ever since Ben Folds kind of came to the scene in Ben Folds 5, any other piano band that you've ever heard of sounds like Ben Folds 5. And that stopped being the case maybe like 7 years ago to where, Pocket Vinyl's guilty of that too, especially our earlier stuff. But there's just so many ways. I mean, think of how many ways you can play a guitar.
Sure.
Like I would argue there's just as many in playing a piano, but often it's like, that, or just like a bum 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 bum, like that. If someone else in a pop song or whatever uses it, there's just kind of a few linear ways of thinking, which are great tools, and we have plenty of Pocket Vinyl songs that use those things too. But I just think there's a lot more to explore there, and I've sometimes I get frustrated when you can't find something, but I've yet to be even close to bored by what the piano can do, in my opinion, anyway.
You guys have been working like the full band in more and more and more.
Yeah.
The new album to me, it has like kind of like some exciting elements of like progginess that I really enjoy. So I kind of wanted to ask, do you like write a song and save it ever for like, that's going to go on a record that more sounds like this? Or like, have you saved a song for a long time not knowing where it was going to go up because you kind of said you theme a lot of things? Or are you like in the moment, I'm working on these, this is what I'm working on?
There are a few. So at the moment, we are, even though we just released this album, we are also working with Tim Donnell and Jay Silva. Tim, who's a friend of the podcast, who's been on,
shout out Tim.
who's on with the Sline. and the Family Stone. He's in there. And Jay Silva, I've been trying to write with them, and they've kind of had their input on songs, and we're hopefully sometime before the end of the year going to be trying to record an album of that, which will kind of be more of a in my mind anyway, like a garage band version of, like, not the program but the actual
No, I know what you're saying.
genre, I guess, of like pocket vinyl records. And I mean, with those, and then like, yeah, there's here's the thing. Sometimes I like, oh, well, these are like more upbeat songs, or this one maybe with this thing. But usually it's like, no, okay, we're writing about death now. And okay, so then every song I'm working on, the lyrics are going to be going like that. Also, and Elizabeth and I were just talking about this. I feel like sometimes if you do that and say like, oh, this sounds good, but like I think it'd be better for this or whatever, it's almost like admitting to yourself that you won't make something that good again. You know what I mean? Like if like saving it. And it's one thing to like organize stuff you're working on, but it's another to be like, oh, well, I'm gonna save this for like another because like that, and I don't, or like another project or something, and I don't ever want to do that because I feel like you're like telling yourself that like, oh, well, I might not do this good again, and I don't want to feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, you said this great line too in that video with the day where you're like, it was something, I'm paraphrasing here, but you were saying something along the lines of like, I used to think that creativity was this thing that you had to like wait around and like find inspiration to be creative, but you found that creativity is actually something that you like, you can kind of like force it out of yourself by like sort of relentlessly pursuing your craft kind of thing.
And I think our best song, I think, since I think I really started doing that by probably with our fourth album, Tin, and that was back in 2014, 15. And since then, almost all of I'll like for a month or something, I'll be like, all right, every day I'm going to write something, whether it's a chord progression, a riff, even just a line of lyrics, just something every day. And then you just force yourself to that. And it's like running or whatever. At first, it might feel a little tight and kind of weird, and it's not the best stuff. But then, by the time you get to day 30 and you look back at what you have, I'd say most, if not all, of our best songs have come from that. There's still times of inspiration where you're just kind of like feeling something, and you just kind of like sit down and you find it. But now, for the most part, I found that creativity is a beast that can be wrangled, not one that you are like beholden to.
Right.
Yeah, and it's ever since I discovered that, I've just felt a lot more productive, which is part of the reason why I think too we like have been releasing albums. We made the movie, we're making the graphic novel. We even have these 2 books are collections of Elizabeth's Turing test stuff. She posts them online. We've break world records. We're going on tour this summer. It's funny when you say you're going on tour because in my mind I'm like, well, yeah, we're always about to go on tour. Like it's as soon as we get back, and usually during the tour we're like already planning the next one. And even like right now I'm in dates for the fall for doing bookstores and libraries and stuff to promote the book. And so it's I don't know, it's just always when you realize that you're in control of creativity more than I think like culture is made us led to believe, it just opens up a whole wide gate of what you understand you're capable of.
Right. There was this great part too, in I'm referencing videos and documentaries and things here, but there was a part of the documentary that I loved too, man, where you're like, I'm standing here in this long hallway and I'm about to go play this show.
It was in Richmond, Virginia.
And and you just look so defeated, and you're like, I do not want to play this show, but I'm going to go play this show. And I'm going to make it look like I want to be there, and the people are going to think that I want to be there, but I do not want to do this. Do you find that, like, on the other end of that, right, there's got to be some sort of, like, like, that it's like these necessary hurdles that you have to kind of overcome and jump over, and then like when you come out of the other side of that, it's that thing where you're like, I don't want to go to the gym, and then you go to the gym and you work out, you come out and you're like, no, it was good that I went to the gym, like that. So would you say that those shows are even more critical? Like those are like some of the most important ones, like the bad shows or the shows you really don't want to do, or do you find they kind of, you know what I mean? Like,
I found that attitude is a big factor. And we've played some shows to like 100 people who no one cares or is paying attention and doesn't give you the time of day or anything afterwards, and the painting doesn't go for very much, and it, and then we played some shows to 5 people and they all buy a bunch of mercs and we walk out with like $500 afterwards. It's quality, not quantity, when it comes to an audience, and you honestly never know who's there who will connect with what you do. And that show in particular that you're referencing, I remember it, and it turned out great. It was fun. Yeah, we played with a local. They probably brought out like 5 to 10 people. There's a guy named Justin Golden who we actually interviewed. He's in the movie too.
Okay.
I remember it wasn't like the best show ever, but like if you just kind of do your thing and you kind of believe in what you're doing, even when you don't want to do it. Also, I will say that there is a certain point when you've done this enough that, you can kind of like. There's shows where I feel like I played horribly and did bad, and then afterwards people come up and they go, "That was so great," and you're just like, "Okay." And I've learned to just not argue with them, and you're just like, "Yeah, sure, fine." But so I think there's like maybe just a bit of muscle memory of what you want the show to be that your body kind of will do. But I don't know. It's there have been. The amount of times that you're like, oh, this is a bad show, or like this looks like it'll be a bad show, and then it turns out to be a bad show, is far fewer than the ones that look like they're going to be a bad show, and you're like, okay, but let's still do our best, and you do, and then it turns out into a great show. Yeah.
It's very exciting. Are you so you're doing bookstores this fall?
Trying to, yeah. It's a whole nother world trying to book bookstores.
Well, I kind of wanted to ask you,
or libraries, as we call them.
Yes, libraries. Oh, that's a good
Alex
inside joke over here.
You know there's a difference, right?
Is there?
We're talking about libraries. I was like, like Books A Million. And we're like, that's not a library.
You said you could take out books from there.
Sorry, Alex. We love you. We're just busting stones.
The page master over here.
We have to say it.
The face master. So that's why I kind of wanted to ask you, are you excited to be playing these bookstores? Or do you think it's going to be like a different kind of whole nother adventure for the band?
I hope so.
And where are you going to be playing? Do you know yet?
So the book comes out October 10th. We know on October 7th, if anyone's watching this locally, we're going to be doing kind of a pre-release thing at Savoy bookstore in Westerly, Rhode Island, which is not too far from here.
Okay.
Great bookstore.
And that was actually, we played there while we're doing that, is there in the book, because that was the Rhode Island date for that whole 50 States tour. And then on the day, October 10th, we're going to be playing at the Telegraph, which that we played there for the Connecticut show on the tour, and that's a Tuesday. And then pretty much from there, we're going to go all the way across all the northern states. Well, I guess the other way if you're looking on a map from. But we're going to go all the way to the West Coast to Seattle and hit kind of Portland, Oregon, and then kind of come back probably about 5 weeks or so. I'm still in the middle of kind of booking it. And then in December, we're doing a lot of like more local stuff in New England, and in January, February, as that gets closer, we're hopefully going to be doing the South and all the way to California and back. And our hope is to try to kind of within the first year of the book release hit, almost every, if not every state in the lower 48.
Nice.
Just kind of like we did.
Yeah.
We did have an idea of trying to do a book tour of libraries or bookstores. And do that in all 50 states in 45 days to promote the book, like do the thing again, which we thought, we were like, wouldn't that be funny if we released this book about completely destroying our mental health of playing a show in every state, and then we did it again to promote the book.
I would be so afraid for you.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
It was
do you
like,
know
"Fuck you, man."
what broke that idea was not us. It was we told that to the publisher who's putting it. This actually. Too, like most of the stuff we've done is all like release and self-published stuff. But this is the first time with this book we're working with the publisher, and we like told them, and they just like on the Zoom call were like, "Oh, I don't know if that's such a like." They were like clearly like
we can always type up an epilogue about how you lost your minds again. It's only one more piece of paper.
Well, then we found out too that after that Zoom call, they got back on with our literary agent who is part of that, and we're just like, they can't do that. Like they like, which is kind of funny because we're like, we could do it. We did it. We wrote a book. There's proof. We did it. I don't know why. But yeah, then we kind of thought about it more after that reaction. We're like, it's probably best we don't try to do that again.
Looking out for your best interest at heart.
Yeah, but we were like, but they won't be late shows. They'll be like at 5 or 6, at night, like at bookstores and stuff. We won't. It'll be so much easier because we'll get sleep.
Because you have to drive through the night every night. So it makes it so much worse.
Yeah, that was another wrinkle that I'm sure we would have figured out.
I love this so much. And so going in, you've played bookstores before. Do you are you gonna bring in the full band out, or are you just going to kind of do the two? Yeah,
just because the book was just the duo of us. We're pretty much like we still have a good portion of the tour coming up is full band, and we have some we're playing like a Strange Brew in August again, full band and stuff like that. But for the most part, we'll be just doing the duo stuff once the book comes out for a little while.
It's very, very exciting.
And just for point of reference, on this day, how many shows have you played?
I mean,
I know, not to put. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, the 1000th one was in November.
Yes, that was that Strange Brew that we came. Yeah, we were that.
I would guess somewhere in the 1030s or 1040s at this point. Was it June 7th? June 6th?
Yes.
Yeah, June 7th.
June 7th.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But we were hitting a good clip for about 100 shows a year, like on average. When we filmed the movie to get footage, we did 136, which that was rough. That was of me like, I don't want to be here. So that was like show 128 or something like that, where I'm just like, I'm done doing this.
I commend you guys for your endurance, man, because that's not for the faint of heart. Luke and I were talking about it. I think it was yesterday morning, maybe, and we're like, it should be a requirement for every new band who wants to go on a tour to watch this documentary. Like, this is like necessary viewing for all young aspiring musicians to just be like, this is what it really is.
One of our favorite things, we did a tour where we went and showed that at like bars and stuff with like TVs and things, and we had this one show where like like younger college age kid like came up to us and was just like after the film and was like, man, that movie like made me want to start a band. And we were just like, oh, wow, that's so cool. Like we're influencing these people. Oh, that's so cool that we can put that in the world. And like 5 minutes later, someone like same age and stuff came up and was like, man, that made me never want to start a band. I was just like, I think we did exactly what we set out to do. Like, we didn't want to glorify it. We just wanted to factually show it. And depending on what your brain chemistry is at, you can be like, that's awesome. Or like, this is horrible. Like, terrifying. I would never want to do this.
I mean, but it was great, too, because you were like, this is the different types of venues. This is the different styles of payment. This is So
yeah, we try to just spell it out.
It was so informative too, and it's like, oh, this is such a great resource. If anything, just a great resource to just understanding how everything works.
Well, and that's too with the new graphic novel. The title, "How to Completely Lose Your Mind." There's a lot of how-to pages of like packing the car, packing your clothes, how to eat, how to play a show to 5 people, how to do like a lot of stuff that we've even talked about that we kind of put into the story, and then like as the story and the mental health goes, it kind of the fourth wall breaking, like the book kind of does that quite a bit and goes into all that. But it's funny to me, and you're not the first to say this, but when you're like, oh, it's your endurance, like impressive or whatever, and it kind of like what you said of like, oh, there's like vulnerable and stuff, like it. I would say that there's a misunderstanding of Elizabeth and I. It's like we feel like we don't have a choice. Like there's something in our brains, or whether you call it passion or drive or mental illness. There's something that's like, but we gotta play the show. And some of that, like when you're like, I don't want to do this stuff, there's still that thing in you that's like, but you have to. And I mean, whether it's trauma from like of needing attention or like an ego thing, or I don't know, but I've heard I don't know, I've there's a stand-up comedian, I forget who, but who had some like famous thing where someone asked them like, oh, like, yeah, I want to do it, or it was hard, or like doing stand-up comedy, and they're like, oh, you don't do it because you think you have something to say. You do it because you feel like you have no other choice. And that it feels the same way.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's our endurance that needs praising as much as just it's. I don't know. It's just a thing that thankfully we're blessed to have, and I think I know a lot of talented bands who try to go on tour and do it, and they don't. Not to say that they're less passionate about their music or whatever, but like whatever that thing is that just drives you to go play shows. And it also does help that we're like married, we're together, there's not like, I mean, we have cats that we miss, but there's not like a loved one back home. You know what I mean? So if you're on, so that certainly helps. But yeah, I don't know. It's just it's a thing that you can't help but do. That it often feels like I have no choice.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said. Before we wrap up, Eric, can you give us some like ats of where we can find you, where we can find your music, band camps, websites, streaming, vinyl, etc., etc.
We really lucked out with a band name. There is nothing else called Pocket Vinyl on the internet except for us. Except every once in a while, I'll get Google alerts for pocket vinyl protectors. Vinyl pocket protect, yeah. But besides that,
merch idea.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, we're big in the polo game.
You're going to libraries. You never know.
That's true. Yeah, no, I don't know. If you're Spotify or Bandcamp or Google or whatever, just put in Pocket Vinyl. You'll find us. All social medias. We have too many inboxes that we have to check. Too many. There's too much stuff. There's too many things to look into. No matter how much music you listen to of us, there's always one more Beatles song in the '90s that we haven't released that you won't find. There's almost too much stuff. Take it slow, but I don't know. There's a lot of stuff to find, and so any physical stuff, come to a show or on Bandcamp, most of it's there, I think.
This is going to be a plea from a host here. We love Pocket Vinyl. You should go to a Pocket Vinyl show. We are proud of them. They are from New London, which is close to our home over here, and they've been doing it for forever. It's who they are, and I hope Pocket Vinyl is here for another 13 or 20 years, and we could have a full career. So I just want to say, thank you for being a band, and thank you for coming on this podcast, and thank you for never stopping what you're doing. It's inspirational to all of us. So
yeah.
Well, thank you
You're
very
here.
much. Yeah,
Thanks for joining us,
Eric.
Thanks for
you.
being
man.
here.
And you're always welcome back anytime.
Absolutely.
Wait, thanks for
Anytime.
being
Elizabeth,
here.
too.
Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth.
You have a home.
Thanks for being here.
Yes, and thank you, Elizabeth, too.
And happy Pride Month to everyone out there.
Yes,
too.
yes. We'll
Pride
see you
Month,
guys
everyone.
next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.